Part 1. The afternoon sun was slowly fading, casting long shadows across the quiet neighborhood where the millionaire's mansion stood. People often passed by just to look at the place, because it was the kind of house that made everyone stop for a moment. Tall walls, shiny metal gates, and a driveway that looked like a road leading into another world. On most days it stayed silent, but today it was filled with noise, music, conversations, and people wearing fancy clothes. A charity event was going on inside the mansion. Expensive cars rolled in and out. Laughter echoed from the garden. Soft music played in the background as servers moved from group to group, carrying trays filled with snacks that looked too delicate to even touch. The guests talked about business, travel, and things that most people could never afford. But outside the gate, standing close to the wall as if trying not to bother anyone, was a kid who didn't fit in at all. His clothes were old, dusty, and didn't match. His hair was messy, and he carried a worn-out keyboard that seemed too heavy for his small frame. He held it tightly, almost protectively, like it was something precious. He had been standing there for a while, hoping someone would notice him. Not in a big way, just enough to spare a little food. He wasn't trying to be a problem. He was simply hungry. His stomach had been empty since morning, and he had walked from another part of the city just because he heard there was an event happening. Here, people usually left leftovers after big gatherings. Maybe someone kind would hand him a small box of food. As expensive cars moved in and out, he gathered the courage to step forward. He approached the gate slowly, unsure if the guards would chase him away. But the guards were too busy managing the incoming guests, so he took a deep breath and approached a server carrying a tray of pastries. "Excuse me, do you have anything extra?" he asked softly, almost whispering. The server paused, surprised. Before he could answer, one of the guests overheard and frowned. "Who is this kid? Is he from the street? Why is he here?" Another guest chuckled under their breath. "Probably looking for free food." They didn't say it loudly, but it was enough for others to look over. The kid lowered his eyes, embarrassed. He was used to reactions like this, yet they always stung. He wasn't begging to disturb anyone. He just wanted to eat before anything more could be said. The mansion's owner, the millionaire himself, stepped out onto the front steps. He was a tall man with a sharp look, the kind of man who made everyone quiet when he walked into a room. People respected him. Some feared him. He was successful, powerful, and known for building his business from nothing. But he was also known for being strict, serious, and emotionally distant. He noticed the small group near the gate and the kid standing awkwardly with his keyboard, his eyebrows pulled together. "What's going on here?" he asked. The server tried to explain quickly. "Sir, this kid was just asking if we had extra food." The guests looked uncomfortable, unsure if they should stay or move away. The millionaire's eyes moved to the kid. "Is that true?" he asked. The kid hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, I just wanted something to eat." His voice was so soft that even the closest people had to lean in a bit to hear. The millionaire stared at him for a moment. Something about the kid's old keyboard caught his attention. It was scratched and taped in different places, but it looked like it had been cared for deeply. "You carry that thing everywhere?" the millionaire asked. The kid nodded again. "I play, sometimes." On the street, a few guests smirked, whispering, "A street kid musician. That's new." The millionaire lifted his hand slightly, and the whispers stopped. "So you play," he said, his voice calm but sharp. "Are you good?" The kid looked unsure. "I tried to beat something in that answer." Made the millionaire's expression harden, almost like he was disappointed. "Trying isn't enough," he said. "Everyone tries. The world rewards those who can actually do something." The guests nodded as if he had just said something very wise. The millionaire pointed at the grand piano inside the open hall. Its lid was raised, its polished surface shining under the lights. It was a piano worth more than everything the kid had ever owned in his entire life. "Tell you what," the millionaire said. His tone changed. It became challenging, almost mocking, but also curious. "Play that piano. If you can impress me, I'll make sure you never have to ask for food again." He paused, letting his words sink in. "If you play it well, I'll take you in." A soft wave of gasps moved through the guests. A few laughed quietly. "He's joking, right?" someone whispered. "Well, this will be interesting," another said. But the kid didn't take it as a joke. He held his keyboard closer, as if unsure if he should walk away or move forward. His heart raced. Part of him wanted to run. Another part wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, this could change something. He swallowed hard. "You want me to play that?" he asked, pointing at the grand piano. "Double quotes, yes." The millionaire replied, "If you want food, show us what you can do." The kid's legs felt weak. He had never touched a real grand piano before. He had only played on his old keyboard, sometimes in parks, sometimes under bridges, sometimes outside busy shopping areas. People sometimes stopped to listen, but most walked past without noticing. Still, he loved playing. Music was the only thing that made him feel like the world wasn't so heavy. He looked past the millionaire at the piano. The room beyond the steps looked enormous. Everything inside the house looked expensive and perfect. He wasn't sure if he even belonged near any of it. The millionaire watched him with raised eyebrows. Well, the kid took a slow breath. His stomach was empty. His hands were trembling, and he could feel many eyes on him. But he knew he couldn't leave now. Not after coming all the way here. Not after being given a chance, even if it was a mocking one. "I'll play," the kid said quietly. He stepped forward, passing through the crowd that stared at him with surprise or curiosity. Some people whispered things like, "This is ridiculous," while others said, "Let's see how this goes." As he walked up the steps and entered the mansion, he felt as if he were stepping into a place that existed in another reality. The floor was shiny, the lights bright, and everything felt too clean for someone like him. But the piano drew him in. It looked like a dream. He could see his reflection on its surface. For a moment, he forgot the people watching. He forgot the millionaire's challenge. He forgot he was hungry. All he saw was the piano. Yet deep inside, nerves twisted his stomach. This was his chance, but he wasn't sure if he could do it. He had never played on something like this. He didn't know if he would mess up. He didn't know if anyone would laugh, but he kept walking. Behind him, the millionaire folded his arms, watching with an expression that was impossible to read. The guests leaned in, whispering to each other. The servers paused as if they knew something unusual was about to happen. The kid reached the piano bench. He placed his old keyboard gently on the floor, next to the bench, as if letting go of something familiar hurt a little. Then he sat down slowly. His feet barely reached the pedals. He placed his trembling hands on the keys. Everyone waited. And in that moment, before even a single note was played, he realized that this might be the moment that changes his whole life. Part of the room grew unusually quiet as the kid sat at the grand piano. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy, like everyone was holding their breath without meaning to. People who had been busy laughing, chatting, or sipping expensive drinks now turned their attention toward the small figure sitting on the bench. Even the soft background music that had been playing earlier seemed to fade into nothing. The kid's hands hovered above the keys, but he didn't press anything yet. His heart beat fast, and his arms felt weak. He was used to being watched by strangers on the street, but this was different. This room was full of people who didn't expect anything from him except failure. They thought he came from nothing, and they treated him like nothing. That made the moment even harder. He stared at the keys, trying to steady his breathing. He reminded himself of all the times he played on his old keyboard, even when the battery was low. Even when he had to play quietly so he wouldn't disturb anyone sleeping nearby. Even when the cold made his fingers numb. He remembered why he loved music. It was the only thing that made him feel alive. Behind him, he could hear the rustling of fancy clothes and the clinking of glasses. Some people whispered things they assumed he couldn't hear. Is he scared? He probably doesn't know how to play at all. This is going to be awkward. But not every whisper was harsh. A few guests seemed curious, maybe even hopeful. Look at how he holds himself. Maybe he knows something. I've seen street performers who can play better than trained musicians. Those comments gave him a tiny bit of courage. The millionaire leaned against the staircase railing, arms crossed. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were sharp, locked on the kid like he was waiting to see something specific. He wasn't smiling, and he wasn't joking. He really wanted to see what would happen. Go on, the millionaire said calmly. Play something. The kid nodded slowly. He placed his fingers on the keys. They were cold at first, but the smooth texture felt strangely comforting. He tested a few keys softly, just enough to feel the difference. The sound that came out was richer and deeper than anything his small keyboard could ever produce. It amazed him. He had dreamed of touching a real grand piano, but he never thought he actually would. He closed his eyes for a moment. He tried to forget the people watching. He tried to forget he was hungry. He tried to forget this might be the one chance he had to change everything. He took a deep breath, and then he began. The first note he played was soft, gentle, almost like he was afraid the piano might reject him. But it didn't. The note rang through the hall like a warm breeze passing through an open window. Some guests straightened up, surprised by the purity of the sound. the kid continued, playing a melody he had created himself over time, something he played on the street when he wanted people to feel something, even if they didn't stop to listen. It was a melody built from tiny pieces of his life, nights spent alone, moments of small kindness from strangers, days where he played to distract himself from hunger. Each note carried something real. A few guests stopped breathing for a second, caught off guard by the emotion in his music. The kid didn't rush. He played slowly, letting each note stretch out into the air before the next one followed. The room that once felt cold and judgmental now felt softer, warmer, like the music was touching something inside everyone. The millionaire listened carefully. His expression softened without him realizing. He had expected the kid to stumble or play something childish, but this was something else. There was feeling in every sound. Some guests glanced at the millionaire, trying to see his reaction. They had never seen him look like that. The kid continued, his fingers moving more confidently with each passing moment. He wasn't thinking anymore, he was feeling. The piano wasn't just an instrument now. It was like a friend responding to him, echoing what he felt inside. He forgot the hunger. He forgot he was being judged. For the first time in a long time, he felt seen, not because of pity or curiosity, but because of something he could do. People who had been smiling at the situation earlier now looked serious, moved by the music. A woman near the back wiped her eyes quietly. A server paused, holding a tray mid-air without realizing it. Even the guards at the gate, who had followed the crowd inside out of curiosity, stood still like statues. The kid shifted into a different part of the melody, one that carried a heavier emotion. It wasn't sad, but it wasn't happy either. It felt like longing. It felt like a heart trying to speak. He didn't fully understand it himself. He just knew this was the music he needed to play. When he reached the higher notes, his hands trembled a little, but the sound came out beautifully. The guests glanced at each other, silently surprised. It was clear now that the kid wasn't pretending. He wasn't guessing. He was a musician, even if no one had ever taught him formally. The melody grew fuller, deeper. It filled every corner of the hall. The guests could feel it, not just hear it. It made them think of things they didn't talk about often, memories they thought they had buried, dreams they forgot they once had. The millionaire felt something too, but he didn't want to show it. He kept his arms crossed tightly, as if trying to hold himself together. The kid moved into the final part of the melody. This part was peaceful, calm, like a sigh after a long journey. He pressed one final note. The sound lasted for a long moment before fading slowly into silence. The room stayed still. Nobody clapped. Nobody moved. It wasn't because they didn't like it, it was because they needed a moment to come back to reality. The kid opened his eyes slowly and looked around, unsure what to expect. His heart pounded, and his palms were sweaty. He wasn't sure if he had impressed anyone. He didn't even know if he played perfectly. He only knew he played from his heart. Then he heard a sound, not from the guests, but from the millionaire. It was a soft exhale, like someone releasing tension they'd been holding for years. The millionaire stepped forward slowly. His face wasn't cold anymore. It wasn't strict either. It was something the guests weren't used to seeing. Gentle. He walked closer, stopping a few steps behind the kid. You played that? He asked quietly. The kid nodded. Yes, that piece. Who taught you? No one, the kid said. I made it up. I just play how I feel. For a moment, the millionaire didn't speak. His jaw tightened slightly, and he blinked more than usual. Those who knew him well realized something was happening inside him, but they didn't understand what. The kid lowered his eyes, afraid he might have done something wrong. Was it okay? He asked softly. The millionaire didn't answer right away. He looked at the piano, then at the kid, then back at the piano again. Finally, he spoke. Play something else, he said. His voice wasn't sharp this time. It was calm. The kid nodded slowly, surprised but relieved. He placed his hands on the keys again, ready to continue. But before he began, the millionaire added quietly, I want to hear more. The guests exchanged looks. Something important was happening even if they didn't fully understand it yet. The kid took another breath, and he began to play again. This time, the room leaned in even closer, ready for whatever came next. Part 3. The kid placed his fingers on the keys again, but this time he didn't rush. He took a moment to breathe, letting the room settle around him. The guests had grown quiet, and the air felt different now. It was no longer filled with judgment or curiosity. It was filled with something gentler, something close to respect. He didn't know what to play next. He hadn't planned anything. On the street, he usually played whatever came to his heart. He never needed sheet music or instructions. The music just flowed out of him like it had always been waiting inside. So he closed his eyes once more and let his hands move. The second melody he played was lighter than the first. It had a soft rise and fall, almost like a story being told without words. It felt like a walk through a quiet morning, like a slow breeze or sunlight touching a window. The notes were simple but full of emotion. The guests listened closely. Even those who had been bored earlier now leaned forward, drawn in by the gentle flow of sound. A few people who held drinks forgot to take a sip. Others who had planned to leave stayed exactly where they were. The millionaire watched the child's hands as they moved across the keys. The kid wasn't using complicated techniques. He wasn't trying to show off. He was simply expressing something real. And sometimes, real things cut deeper than anything fancy. As the kid continued to play, the millionaire felt a strange tightening in his chest. It wasn't a bad feeling, it was an emotional one. But he wasn't used to emotions catching him by surprise. He had built his life on control. Control of his business. Control of his time. Control of his image. Control of his emotions. Almost nothing got through to him anymore. He had trained himself to stay focused, to stay distant, to stay strong. But the kid's music slipped through all those walls like water finding its way through cracks. A memory rose in his mind, unexpected, uninvited. He was young again, sitting in a small room with peeling paint, watching someone he cared about play an old upright piano. The sound wasn't perfect, but it was warm, safe. It was the kind of music that carried a deep love he hadn't felt in a long time. He blinked. The memory faded, but the feeling stayed. The kid kept playing, unaware of the effect he was having. His fingers danced gently, moving to a rhythm only he understood. He didn't think about impressing anyone. He didn't think about mistakes. He only thought about the sound. Some guests whispered softly, but this time it wasn't mocking. "He's special. You can hear it. He plays with emotion, not just skill." "I didn't expect this." A man near the front nodded slowly. "This kid has something rare." Even the servers, who usually stayed expressionless while working, watched with soft eyes. One of them smiled quietly, touched by the music. The kid shifted the melody again, letting it rise a little higher. It grew brighter, like a small spark of hope. It was the kind of music that made a person feel like things could get better, even if life had been hard. A woman near the back placed a hand over her heart without thinking. Another person swallowed hard, looking away as if embarrassed by the tears gathering in their eyes. The kid wasn't trying to move anyone, but that's what made it powerful. The millionaire's breathing grew uneven, but he tried to stay still. He didn't want anyone to see what was happening to him. He had spent years building an image of strength, of being untouched by emotion, but the music had slipped past that mask. The kid reached a turning point in his melody. The notes became softer, almost like a whisper. His hands trembled a little, but that only added to the emotion. He played as if he were telling a secret he had never shared. The millionaire suddenly felt himself taken back to another moment, standing outside a small music shop as a child, listening through the window because he couldn't afford lessons. He remembered the feeling of wanting to learn, but being too afraid to ask anyone for help. That memory hurt, and the music brought it back so clearly that he felt his eyes burn. He blinked again, but this time the feeling didn't fade. The kid played the final section of the melody, letting the sound fall gently like evening light fading from the sky. The notes softened slowly until the last one hung in the air like a quiet breath. Then, silence, yet deep silence. A silence that held the emotions of everyone in the room. The kid kept his hands on the keys for a moment. He didn't dare lift them yet. He didn't know if he did well. He didn't know if the millionaire was impressed or disappointed. He only knew that he played his heart out. When the silence finally broke, it wasn't with applause. Nobody clapped yet. They were too moved, too heavy with the weight of what they just felt. Instead, the millionaire stepped forward. His shoes clicked softly on the polished floor. He walked until he stood only a few steps behind the boy. The kid slowly turned, nervous. The millionaire looked at him. For the first time in a very long time, there were tears in his eyes, not many, just enough to shine. He didn't wipe them away. He didn't try to hide them. He just let them sit there, like something inside him had finally broken open. The guests noticed. They exchanged shocked glances. Some whispered, "I've never seen him cry. This is unreal. He must really feel something." But the millionaire didn't care about them. He didn't hear their whispers. His full attention was on the kid. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out at first. He had to take a slow breath before he could control his voice. Finally, he asked softly, "Where did you learn to play like that?" The kid shrugged a little. I just play how I feel. The millionaire nodded slowly, still trying to understand the emotion running through him. Do you know what you did? He asked. The kid looked confused. I just played. No, the millionaire said quietly. You didn't just play. He paused, taking another breath. You made me feel something I haven't felt in a long time. The kid blinked, unsure what to say. The millionaire turned away for a moment, trying to steady himself. He looked at the piano, at the guests, at the room. Everything felt different now. He had invited the kid to play as a challenge, almost as a joke. He had done it expecting nothing, but now he realized he had been completely unprepared for the truth of the boy's talent. He turned back to the kid. Stand up, he said softly. The kid obeyed, unsure if he was in trouble or if something else was happening. The millionaire stepped closer until they were face to face. You changed something in me today, he said. The guests held their breath. The millionaire's voice softened even more. And I don't know how to thank you for that. The kid opened his mouth, but no sound came out. But I do know this, the millionaire continued. You're not leaving here to sleep hungry again. The kid's eyes widened. The guests looked at each other, stunned. The millionaire placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. From this moment, he said, you have a place here. A few people gasped. Others smiled softly. Some even teared up, but the kid didn't speak. He couldn't. His throat tightened, and he felt something warm rise in his chest. For the first time in a long time, someone believed in him. The millionaire looked around at the room, his voice steady again. He's staying with me, he said. He's not alone anymore. Then he turned back to the kid. You played your first note, he said, and it made me cry. That means something, and I won't ignore it. The kid felt his own eyes grow warm. He lowered his head, trying to hold in the emotion. The millionaire didn't let him. He gently lifted the kid's chin. You did well, he said. The kid finally let out a shaky breath. The guests began to clap softly at first, then louder, filling the room with a warm, steady rhythm. The kid stood there, overwhelmed, unsure how to react. The millionaire kept his hand on the boy's shoulder, steady and firm. It was the beginning of something neither of them could fully understand yet. But everyone in the room knew one thing. This moment had changed everything. The next morning felt different. Even before the sun had fully risen, the air in the small town carried a quiet buzz, the kind that comes before something unexpected is about to happen. She woke up with a mix of nervousness and hope sitting in her chest, unsure if the previous night's events had truly changed anything, or if it had just been a moment people would soon forget. She got up slowly, washed her face, and tried to calm her thoughts. Part of her still wondered whether she really belonged near a piano at all, even after everything she had already done. But the truth was, something inside her had shifted. After playing so freely the night before, after seeing how people listened with full attention, and after watching their expressions soften and brighten, she felt a small spark that wasn't there before. She didn't know how far music could take her or if it could change her situation, but she did know one thing: she wanted to keep going. She walked outside and followed the sounds of early morning chatter toward the town square. The same cafe owner who had been surprised by her talent the night before spotted her from across the street. Instead of the doubtful look he had given her when she first asked for food, he now waved her over with a kind smile. She hesitated at first, unsure if she even deserved that sort of welcome, but she slowly made her way to him. He offered her breakfast, not as charity this time, but as a thank you for the music that had lifted everyone's spirits. She accepted with a quiet nod and sat down as he placed a warm plate in front of her. As she ate, he told her how people had been talking about her all morning. Folks who had heard her play were still amazed, and those who had missed it were already asking if she would return. Hearing that made her heart beat a little faster. She wasn't used to attention. Most of her life, she had stayed in the background, unnoticed, ignored, or pushed aside. But now, people were whispering about her as if she had done something extraordinary. She wasn't sure how to respond to that, so she simply kept eating, unsure how to process the kindness. After finishing her meal, she thanked the cafe owner softly and stepped back into the street. A small group of people had gathered not too far away, looking in her direction. Their faces were warm, curious, and hopeful, as if waiting for something. One of them approached her and asked if she would play again that evening. She didn't know what to say. She wasn't a performer. She had no stage, no fancy clothes, no proper training, only a heart full of music and a pair of hands that knew how to express it. But the thought of playing again made her feel alive. The sound of the piano had always been her comfort, The one thing that made her forget all the difficulties in her life. Maybe sharing that comfort with others was something she was meant to do. She nodded slowly, and the group of people smiled brightly. They said they would make sure the old piano in the square was cleaned up and ready for her. She felt a quiet warmth inside her chest and whispered a quick thank you. The rest of the day passed slowly. She wandered around the town, taking in the sights and sounds. She watched children chase each other in the park, listened to vendors call out their morning specials, and observed how even ordinary moments seemed to glow a little brighter. For the first time, she wasn't just drifting through her day. She felt like she was part of something, like she mattered. As evening approached, she made her way to the square. A larger crowd had gathered this time. The old piano had been polished as best as it could, and someone had draped a small cloth over the bench to make it a little more comfortable. Lights from nearby shops shimmered across the pavement, giving the scene a gentle glow. She took a deep breath as she stepped toward the piano. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear of playing, but from the weight of the moment. She had never played in front of so many people before, but the memory of the night before gave her strength. She sat down slowly and placed her hands on the keys. The first note rang out softly, then the next, and soon she was playing with a confidence she didn't know she had. The music flowed naturally from her, rising and falling like waves. The crowd grew silent, hanging on to every sound. Some closed their eyes, others placed a hand over their heart, and a few simply watched her fingers move as if witnessing something magical. Her playing wasn't perfect. There were moments where her fingers slipped or hesitated, but no one seemed to care. What mattered was the emotion behind it, the raw sincerity in each note. She played from a place deep inside her, a place formed by all the hardships, hopes, and dreams she had carried alone for so long. When she finished, the crowd erupted in applause. The sound was so strong that it startled her. She had never imagined people cheering for her, especially not like this. She stood up slowly, unsure what to do, until a few people stepped forward, thanking her for the music and telling her how deeply it touched them. One person offered her a warm drink, another handed her a small bag of food. Someone else quietly slipped a few coins into her hand, insisting she deserved it. She was overwhelmed by the generosity. She wanted to refuse, but the look in their eyes told her that accepting their kindness was also a way of honoring their appreciation. As the night went on, she stayed in the square, talking to people, listening to their stories, and answering their questions. She felt strange, but happy, as if she were discovering a version of herself she didn't know existed. A version who wasn't just surviving, but was actually seen and valued. Before she left, an elderly woman approached her. The woman had been watching quietly from the edge of the crowd. She walked slowly, but with a gentle dignity that made people move aside for her. She placed a hand on the young girl's arm and told her that she had a gift that should never be hidden. The woman said she once played piano too, long ago, before her hands grew weak. Hearing the girl play had brought back memories she thought she had lost forever. She thanked her sincerely and told her not to let fear or doubt silence her music again. Those words stayed with the girl long after she left the square. She found a quiet place to rest for the night, but sleep didn't come easily. Her mind replayed every moment: the applause, the smiles, the unexpected kindness, and the encouragement from the elderly woman. She didn't know what the future held or whether her life would change in ways she couldn't yet imagine, but she knew one thing for sure: she was no longer alone in her journey. People believed in her, even if she still struggled to believe in herself. And that small spark inside her had grown into something brighter, something that she couldn't ignore anymore. For the first time, she began to wonder if music wasn't just something she loved. Maybe it was something she was meant to share with the world. The moment the kid finished playing, the room stayed completely silent. It was the kind of silence that didn't feel empty at all. Instead, it felt full of emotions that no one knew how to express yet. The millionaire stood there with his back slightly turned, trying to hide how much the music had shaken him. His eyes were wet, and he kept wiping them quickly as if he didn't want anyone to notice. But everyone already knew something inside him had changed. The kid slowly lowered his hands from the piano keys. He looked around carefully, almost scared to make eye contact. He had poured everything he had into that piece. It wasn't just music to him. It was the only way he knew how to speak about what hurt him, what kept him alive, and what he hoped for. He didn't know if it was enough. He didn't know if the millionaire would keep his promise. He stood up quietly, expecting someone to tell him to leave. He was used to that feeling, the feeling of being tolerated only for a moment, before being pushed away. He held his small bag close to his chest, waiting. That was when the millionaire finally turned around. For the first time since the kid met him, his face didn't look strict or annoyed. His expression was soft, almost like he was looking at something precious. He took a step forward, but he didn't speak right away. He seemed to be fighting with his emotions, trying to gather himself before opening his mouth. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded different, slower, gentler. You didn't just play a song," he said quietly. "You played something that people feel in their bones. I haven't felt something like that in a very long time." The kid stayed silent. He didn't know what to say, and he didn't trust his voice not to shake. The millionaire looked at him for a long moment, then nodded to himself, as if he had just made a decision he couldn't take back. "I want you to stay," he said. "You asked for food, but you deserve more than a meal. You deserve a chance, and I want to give you that chance." The kid blinked fast, unsure if he heard correctly. His heart raced, and he held his breath without meaning to. "You mean?" He began softly. "Yes," the millionaire said before he could finish. "I want you to live here. I want you to learn properly. I want you to grow, and I want to help you do that." The kid's lips parted in surprise. For a moment he couldn't move. It felt unreal, like someone had suddenly switched his whole life from darkness to light. A few guests clapped quietly. Others wiped their eyes, still touched by what had happened. They knew they had witnessed something rare, something that didn't happen every day. The millionaire placed a hand gently on the kid's shoulder. "Come with me," he said softly. "We'll start with a good meal, a proper one, and then we'll talk about the rest." The kid nodded slowly. He didn't trust his voice yet, so he didn't speak. But inside, he felt something warm growing, something he hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. Hope. They walked together toward the dining room. The kid felt nervous at first, unsure if he was supposed to follow so closely. But every few steps, the millionaire slowed down to make sure he wasn't left behind. When they reached the table, a chef hurried in with plates stacked with fresh food. The kid stared at the steaming dishes, feeling his stomach twist with hunger and disbelief. The millionaire noticed and smiled faintly. "Eat as much as you want," he said. "No one here will stop you." The kid sat down carefully, as if afraid the chair might vanish under him. He took his first bite slowly, then another. Soon, he was eating with quiet but clear gratitude, savoring each bite. He kept glancing up at the millionaire, unsure if he was being watched or judged. But the millionaire only watched with a gentle expression, as if seeing the kid's comfort brought him comfort. After the meal, they sat for a while. The kid felt calmer now, but still shy. The millionaire leaned back in his chair and took a breath. "I want you to know something," he said softly. "I wasn't always like this. I used to love music. I grew up with it. But somewhere along the way, life became louder than the things I loved. I forgot what it felt like to truly listen." He paused, watching the kid's small hands resting on the table. "And today," he continued, "you reminded me why music matters, why people matter." The kid looked up slowly. I just played what I felt," he whispered. "That's exactly why it meant something." The millionaire replied. Then he added, "From now on, you will have a teacher, instruments, and a safe place to sleep. And if you ever feel lost or worried, come to me. You're not alone anymore." The kid lowered his eyes as tears finally slid down his cheeks. He tried to hide them, but he couldn't. The millionaire reached out and gently tapped the table to get his attention. "Crying doesn't make you weak," he said. "It means you're human." The kid nodded slowly. Later that evening, the millionaire showed him a small room near the music room. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and warm. There was a bed with soft blankets, a desk, and a small lamp. When the kid stepped inside, he felt something he had never felt before: safety. He placed his little bag on the desk and turned to the millionaire, unsure what to say. The millionaire gave him a soft smile. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow we'll start fresh." When he left, the kid sat on the bed and ran his hand over the blanket. It felt unreal. After everything he had gone through, after all the times he had been pushed aside or ignored, he finally had a place to call his own. He lay down slowly, staring at the ceiling. His mind felt full and quiet at the same time. He breathed deeply, and for the first time in a very long while, he didn't feel scared about tomorrow. He felt something else instead. Possibility. He closed his eyes, letting the feeling sink in. He didn't know what his future would look like, but he knew it would be different, better, brighter. And it had all begun with a single note. As he drifted to sleep, he whispered to himself, "I won't waste this chance. I'll make him proud." In the hallway, the millionaire paused outside the door, hearing the faint words, His expression softened with a mix of emotion and determination. "You already did," he whispered back, though the kid couldn't hear him. And that night, in the quiet halls of the large mansion, a new story began, one built not on wealth, but on kindness, music, and the unexpected power of a small boy's first note. It was the beginning of a bond that would change both their lives forever.